Hi everyone, you're watching the Virtual Amicus and I'm Jay Ludha. So today we'll be discussing insider trading, the basics. So before we start with the topic, I'll first like to talk about the need for protection of securities market and why investors are the backbone of the securities market. So because obviously they will invest only if the market supports and protects investment, not only from the point of view of an investment, but also from on return of investment, but also from any malpractices, frauds that establish credibility in its operations. So it is very important to retain that confidence in the markets. And for that, it is very important that these scams and these malpractices that are taking place, they do not disturb the whole tempo and the whole sentiment that is required for the purposes of positive performance of the market. Now we all are aware of these Ponzi schemes and these misleading campaigns that have taken place. The Harshad Mehta scam, the Ketan Parekh scam had shaken the markets and as well as the banking system in 2002 and even earlier than that. Then also the Satyam computer disclosures that had taken place that had shaken the confidence of the entire IT industry. So it was very important to remdify all of this. And so Sebi, which is the Securities Exchange Board of India, now Sebi is like a regulatory body of securities market. So there came a time when it was required to remedify all of this to protect the investors and to operate on the credibility that can normally be categorized into small investors, promoters, large institutional investors, etc. and etc. So that is how it all started, and these provisions came into being. Now let's come to insider trading. Now, what do you mean by insider trading? It refers to the act of trading securities of any listed company by any person who has access to certain private, sensitive information. Now, the key word here is, I'll pause here for a minute, private, sensitive information, key person, and that information, which is the private, sensitive information, is not available to the general public or to the public at large. Now, such type of practice or such type of trading either results in one, manipulation of the prices of these securities, or it leads to economic advantage of a particular individual or a personal economic advantage of that of a particular shareholder, or it basically harms the general interest of the public shareholder. So basically it is done so as for the purposes of uh, so the resulting in personal economic advantage of one person and causing loss to the public at large. Now, the Securities Exchange Board of India, the regulatory authority in the securities market, deriving its power from Section 30 of the Sebi Act, which is the Securities Board of India Act of 1992, they brought into force certain regulations. And what were these regulations called? They were known as the Sebi Prohibition of Insider Trading Regulations of the year 1992. Now, any regulation that comes into force has certain objectives to it. What were the objectives of these regulations? The objectives were, one, to curb any kind of activity of insider trading with a host of measures that included exhaustively defining the technical and keywords. So it basically defined what these keywords were, like the insider, one, two, connected person, three, price sensitive information, and thus it gave the power to the board to conduct certain investigations, to frame certain codes of internal procedures, so as to conduct investigations, carry out inquiries, so as to prosecute and punish the person who's guilty of insider trading. We come to certain important definitions that we need to understand so as to understand the whole concept of insider trading. Now, what do we mean by the term connected person? So, who is a person qualifies to be a connected person? How do you define it? What does the term connected person mean? So the connected person means or refers to a person who has greater access to unpublished price sensitive information. Now, who is a connected person? Someone who has access to unpublished price sensitive information in the day-to-day working of the company. Now, someone who is like a director of a company or someone who's involved in these day-to-day operations of the company would definitely have access to such unpublished price sensitive information. uh, is called a connected person. It could be an officer, it could be an employee of a company, it could be a director of a company, any person having any kind of professional relationship with that of a company is a person who's having access to UPSI. Now, UPSI is a full form of unpublished price sensitive information. So there, so why inside? What are the how is a connected person defined? Someone who has greater access to this UPSI, which is the unpublished price sensitive information. Now, what is the objective of insider trading? Let's quickly recapitulate, revise. Causing personal economic advantage, it harms the general interest of public at large, and it results in manipulation of prices of securities. Now we come to definition number 2. So earlier we discussed connected person, definition number 1. Now we come to what or who is an insider. Now, the definition of insider is obviously broader than that of a connected person, as it includes anyone who's connected with the company and reasonably expected to have access to that UPSI, which is the unpublished price sensitive information, or is in just receipt of that UPSI or has access to it. And the other part includes the scope. Even those who are not connected with the company and establishes the ambit of that of an insider becomes being broader than that of a connected person. So it is definitely the definition of an insider, which is broader than that of a definition of a connected person. So uh, then there can be a connected person who is not an insider at the same time. Now we come to definition number 3, which is the price sensitive information. Now, what do you mean by price sensitive information? Any information that materially affects the price of that security of a company or when disclosed to public. So as soon as it is this information about certain prices of a company, listed company or pertaining to shares is made public, it affects and materially affects the price of the securities of that company. So it is called price sensitive information. Now, the regulation by which it is considered to be private information could result in periodical financial results, amalgamation, etc. So when does this activity of insider trading occur? If I ask myself a question that when does, what are the ingredients of this offense, and when in what circumstances does this occur? So when there's any insider means a person in the company, on the basis of UPSI, the information which is sensitive and yet not published in the public domain deals in securities, even if on behalf of somebody else. Such trading is called insider trading. So he deals it on behalf of somebody else also. It qualifies to be that of insider trading. So it results in insider trading. Now there have been an insider who's under investigation. If there's an investigation that is instituted against an alleged insider, he has to obey with all the rules and regulations under this under the provisions of the act. He has to declare all those documents, evidences, records of that pertaining to the complaint that is made by any of the investors on the intermediaries. He has to cooperate with investigation agencies. He is obligated to provide the books of accounts, records, and any other document that is required by the investigative agencies. So he has to cooperate with any kind of examination. It may also further extend to any proprietor, partner, etc., and etc. And if found guilty, then obviously Sebi has the power to sentence an insider to a maximum of 10 years of prison. A fine would also attract of 25 crores or both. So it depends. The punishment, the punitive part depends from case to case. And to an extent, the Sebi can also declare the entire transaction as void if a person is found guilty of insider trading. Now, there have been a number of instances where certain measures have been taken or adopted by the Sebi to prevent insider trading, which could mean that disclosure policies. Now, what do you mean by disclosure policies? The regulation prescribes a mandatory disclosure policy, which is also at two levels. Now, the first one is done at the initial disclosure by anyone who holds more than 5% of shares of voting rights in a listed company to that company, that he has been allotted such voting rights. And the second disclosure policy being is more continual in nature, that any person who's a director or officer of a listed company holds more than 5% of the shares of the voting of that company. So there are certain disclosure policies that have been adopted so as to prevent insider trading. Then you have the model code of conduct that are required to be followed, which are also mentioned in part A of the schedule 1 of the regulations that talk about these how to prevent insider trading. So there will be a compliance officer, then how disclosure is required, how a model code is required. Then there is schedule 1 of part B that prescribes for certain model codes that are required to be complied with and followed, so that this offense is not committed again and again. Now we come to these certain landmark cases in insider trading. Uh, uh, Locally, there is one landmark case of Chandra Kala versus Sebi, and what was the ruling in that judgment? The Honorable Securities Appellate Tribunal held an agreeing principle with the defense that was taken by Mrs. Chandra Kala, and it held that for insider trading to occur, there must be trading that is motivated by the knowledge of UPSI, which is unpublished price sensitive information, and mere possession of UPSI does not constitute to be insider trading. So that there was a landmark judgment of Chandrakala versus Securities Exchange Board of India. Then there are other numerous judgments like Gujarat NRE Mineral Resources Private Limited versus Sebi. Then there was Anil Harish versus Sebi, and it was held by Securities Appellate Tribunal in that judgment that when a company which is in business of infrastructure projects or bags on other normal course on his business is required to give information to the stock exchanges as per regulation 36(7) of the listing agreement. The information need not be price sensitive. So there are certain disclosures that are required to be made that as mandated by the provisions and regulations under SEBI. Then there was Manoj Gaur versus SEBI, Rakesh Agarwal versus SEBI. Then another famous landmark judgment in the case of VK Kaul versus adjudicating officer SEBI. Then there was Hindustan Lever versus SEBI. So these are certain landmark judgments that had dwelled more and created jurisprudence as far as insider trading is concerned. Now, another measure that was adopted by SEBI was that of promulgation of certain ESOP guidelines, employee stock option scheme, employee stock change schemes, etc. That certain stock schemes were introduced so as to prevent this kind of practices, wherein there were guidelines with respect to the eligibility, the compensatory committee, shareholder approval, etc., etc. Now there are certain other fraudulent and unfair practices as well, like rigging, extensive escalation of prices of shares, etc., and etc. So now we come to one of the most important and landmark judgments in the international circuit on insider trading, which is the famous Raja Ratnam case, and also of Rajat Gupta. And just to give you a brief background about this case, it was back in the year 2009. The month was October, and the Justice Department had charged Raja Ratnam, who was a New York hedge fund manager, and he was charged on 14 counts of securities fraud and conspiracy. He was found further guilty on all these 14 counts on May 11th, 2011, and had allegedly cultivated a network of executives, among others, Intel insiders, like McKinsey, IBM, Goldman Sachs. Now, the person who had exposed all of this was Preet Bharara, the government's attorney, who had argued that Mr. Raja Ratnam had approximately $60 million, made $16 million as illicit profits from insider information. And subsequently, his conviction had also taken place. Now, he was Raj Raja Ratnam was probably the 35th person to have been convicted of insider trading out of those 47 people that were charged since 2010. And we'll further see how the focus was on the Warren Buffett's infusion of $5 billion into Goldman Sachs in 2008, and he had given this tip to Rajat Gupta. Now, who was Rajat Gupta? Rajat Gupta was a former director at Goldman Sachs, and he was head of McKinsey Consulting. He also served on the board of Procter and Gamble. And Warren Buffett, as we all are aware, is the CEO of Berkshire Hathaway Investment Company. Preet Bharara was the United States Attorney stationed in South District of New York, and Raj Rajaratnam was the Sri Lankan manager of hedge fund group, the Galleon Group, which had managed 6.5 billion at its height. So this was a landmark case in insider trading, and they say that Mr. Preet Bharara had busted the entire Wall Street, and that was the time when the insider trading cases were at its peak. So with that session, we come to an end with the basics of insider trading. Hope you've understood the definition of an insider, connected person, UPSI, which is the unpublished price sensitive information. Who is an insider? Who is a connected person? Is it only the director who can be an insider, or is there anybody else who can be that? What are these regulations that Sebi has promulgated or enacted so as to prevent insider trading? What are the punitive punishments that can be given and awarded? So there's not much jurisprudence as far as insider trading is concerned. And this was basically about the concepts. And the attempt was to clear your queries with respect to concepts and fundamentals on insider trading. So hope you like this session on insider trading, the basics, the fundamentals. Stay tuned, more episodes will follow. And for any queries, feel free to write to me. I'll be more than happy to assist you on any of your queries on any of the basics or fundamentals. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share my channel. Stay home, stay safe. Please take care of yourselves. Thank you so much once again. Thank you.